Hello guys and gals, welcome back. This week is all about ARPs. But what is an ARP? Is it this? Sadly, no, we're not talking about the classic ARP 2600 today. I'm talking about these, Arpeggios. Yet another Italian term we never translated, the literal definition being to play on harp. I didn't know that until this episode. But I prefer this definition, a type of broken chord. So basically, instead of playing the notes of the chords simultaneously, we break them up. And that's all you really need to know, to be honest. But what better way to learn than studying the greats? I've spent the week recreating some absolute classics. And as you might be able to hear in the background, I've got a little rendition of today's subject going on. It's Prydz's Opus. The main lead for this track is a pure definition of an ARP. So let's dive in. Okay, what's going on there? Right. First of all, 126 beats per minute. Eventually, it's a very slow ramp from about 31 beats per minute until we finally drop at 126. We are in F sharp minor. Originally, I've done my usual trick of converting everything into A minor, so it's nice and easy to look at. But we are playing back in F sharp minor, so everything is -3. So you're hearing it in the original key. So what you can see here is the full progression. It's bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's one chord per bar, split up into 4 groups of 4. So we have one note of the arpeggio on every single 16th. Here's one bar. So we have 16. Same group of 4 repeated. Same direction pattern for every chord. For a total of 6 bars. Yes, you heard me right, 6. That's quite unusual for a dance track. You normally find multiples of 2. 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. So now you know if you've ever struggled to mix this track out before it gets to the slowdown part at the end. That'll be why, because it's rotating in 6s. Makes it very hard to judge where your next track is supposed to come in. Another interesting fact about Prydz's Opus is the start of the song doesn't start on the start of the sequence. If you look here when we drop, it's on this higher note section here, right? The part where the lowest note of the sequence is highest. The start of the track is not there. We actually start on bar 3. I presume the reason for that is because bar 3 is where chord 1 is. But still, interesting that he didn't choose to use the full sequence from the beginning. Anyway, what are the chords? Let me break this down for you nice and simple. I've got them here in their original triad form. Then I'm going to show you what voicing Eric uses to get to the final ARP, because we need 4 notes in each chord, so we can do those 4 groups of 4. But here is our outline. We have chord 6, chord 7, chord 1, kind of a chord 1 next, I'll come back to this, 6, and 4. 6, 7, 1, 1, 6, 4. Here's the total chord progression. So, voicings. So we need 4 notes in every chord. Your first thought might be just to add a 7th to every chord, and that wouldn't be a bad starting point, but Eric's solution is a little bit more nuanced than that. Eric starts the sequence on a rather uncommon one, actually. First, these lower notes are going to be revoiced. These 2 notes are up the octave, leaving what was initially the top note of the chord underneath, what we call an inversion. And our top note is another one of these. Now, normally, chord 6 in a minor key is a major chord. Eric hasn't used a major chord here. He's used what we call a suspended second. One of these, where the third gets replaced with the second. That's our first chord. The second chord is much simpler. It is the standard major chord 7 The new voicing, though, is with the third of the chord here at the top. So that gets moved up the octave. And we duplicate the root again to the upper octave. So that's how our second chord, the chord 7, is voiced. Chord 1 is really easy. We just double the root. Note 1, an octave higher. This next chord is also really simple. It becomes what's called an add 9 chord. Because if this is 1, 3, 5, this would be 7. This is now 9. The next chord is chord 6. Eric's chosen to use a 7th chord for chord 6, but it's like this, with the 5th doubled, but that's 5 notes, you might say. And that's because this, our root note here, is being played by the bass part. And for the last chord, our chord 4, as you might imagine, these ones don't stay down here. Revoice it all the way up like that. Just a bit like we did with the first chord. Except this one is also a 7th chord. So if this is note 1, note 3, note 5, note 7, the final voicing is actually a little bit like what happened with this 6th chord here. He leaves the root to be played by the bass part. Now the upper chord here has 2 7ths in it. So the bass is here. Here's our 3rd, here's our 5th. Then we have 2 7ths. Now let me show you what's happening in the bass line. So we start with chord 6, and it is indeed bass on note 6. Second chord is a chord 7, bass on note 7. Third chord is chord 1, bass on note 1. Fourth chord is a chord 1. However, the bass goes to note 7. So this is now a 9th chord, and it is inverted so that the bass is playing the 7th. You get a good clue as to why when you look at the movement of the bass. It's bridging down to this chord 6. There's different ways of looking at this chord. You could class it as chord 7, 13th, with no 7th. But I think it's simpler just to call it chord 1, 9th, with an inversion. Both are technically right. They're just names. However, the bigger picture here is why these parts are moving the way they are. And you might notice that every time the melody goes down, the bass goes up. Every time the melody goes up, the bass goes down. In music, we call that counterpoint. Two things moving in opposite directions. Now, somebody remind me, why are we here again? Oh yes, arpeggios. Let's arpeggiate. First of all, we ignore the bass. That's doing its own thing. And Eric's pattern is this. Lowest note first. Highest note second. The lower middle is third. Upper middle fourth. And repeat. And so on and so on. Let's listen back with the bass. Now, this is worth mentioning. There's a slight complication with our string layer here. Playing the same thing. But for extra energy, The string layer has 2 added octaves. So you get this. So as you can see, that creates all these doubled notes. So that kind of changes the melodic texture to the ARP versus the way it sounded when it was the single notes at the beginning of the track, right? On the synth. We end up with all this. I've just done this with Ableton's chord plugin to save me programming extra MIDI. You can see I'm adding a +12 and a +24, 2 octaves, to the string layer. Here's a synth. I've got Dext, the free FM synth. It's just kind of a twinkle layer. And the string layer with the 2 extra octaves. So that's Opus. But before we leave, while we have these sounds in place, you might be wondering, as I was, what would Opus have sounded like if the pattern was in a different order? For example, just running the chord from top to bottom. Different vibe, right? Let's do the opposite direction. Try that. Different. You can hear the top note acts as kind of an accent, and changing it from place to place kind of changes the groove a bit. Interesting. Okie dokie, there we go. There's one of the best examples of arpeggios in action. I do have a few more lined up for coming episodes, but if you have any suggestions, get typing away in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, let me know with a thumbs up or a sub. If you'd like to fund this video, you can buy me a coffee in the description, as of course the revenue for this one will rightly go to Eric Prydz and Virgin Records. So, until I think of a sign-off slogan, I will see you next week. Bye-bye.